home, the sign being put on Jeff's house.
Oh, yeah, sure.
It's absolutely disgraceful.
Well, I was
Disgraceful.
I was going over there.
I gave him the address.
Ready, Bill?
I disagree with- I
We're ready to go.
disagree with
Go
a lot
live.
of leaders,
Good.
But that is uncalled for. Don't go to a man's home.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Do appreciate your attendance this evening. I call the April 12th, 2021 meeting to order. We have a couple minutes that we need to be approved, so let's just start off with that. Let's start off with the March 22nd, 2021. Do we have a motion?
I would move to approve those minutes.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Mike, thank you. Further discussion, anything? All in favor? Thank you. And the next item is the March 5th, 2021,
April 5th.
excuse me, April 5, 2021.
I would move that also for approval.
Second.
Ron, second. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Thank you. Bill, manager's report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be doing it from the podium today, only because there are a few slides I have to click through for the people at home to see. I have been asked by several members of the community to just kind of explain our recall process, because we do have two petitioners that have requested the recall of 4 seated school board members. And our charter allows for such a provision for the recall of either town council members or school board members. So I'm not going to go through all this, but this is in Article 5, initiatives for referendums or recall votes. And we're going to be talking about the recall votes. On the ballot, residents, if successful, they'll see one vote that basically says, do you recall the name of the elected official of MSAD 51, and it's either yes or no, and that's really that simple. So that's if we get there. But let me explain to you the process that is required to get there. So upon a written request, we have to prepare petitions for the recall of any elected official. The person that's requesting the recall, in this case it'll be Nick Bejan and Ron Greco, his name has to be on the petition, and they are. They have a possession of those petitions. I will show you what those petitions look like in a second. The petitions will basically, the petitioners will have 30 days to return those petitions to the town clerk's office for certification. What the town charter envisioned for a recall was a fairly high bar. And it basically said that 20%, and this is, I'm sorry, this is different than what most people will see, is 20% of the registered voters, not the ones that voted in the last election. Usually see the number 10% of the voters that voted in the last gubernatorial or presidential election. That's typically the language you'll see. Not in our charter. It basically says 20% of the registered voters, which is a very high number. We have a little over 7,500 registered voters today, so that 20% comes out to 1,505 signatures. And those have to be of registered voters in the town of Cumberland. So that's what the bar is. So 30 days to collect 1,505 signatures. What our hopes are, and I want to share with you that the petitioners have worked very closely with the town clerk and myself, and they have been very good to work with, in a sense that they don't have to follow this, but I've asked them, and so has the clerk, that we try to match the June election up with this petition request, because you as a town council, within 10 days of the town clerk certifying the 1,505 signatures, if they obtain those, have to set an election within 30 days. So Tammy has 10 days to look at all those names, make sure the signatures match up, make sure they're living in the right place, and they count as one vote. Then she comes to you, hopefully on May 10th, if they get to that level, for the election. And that matches up perfectly with our June 8th election. Has to be within 30 days. If they, for some miracle, got all these done in a week and came back to us next week, we'd have to hold a separate election prior to the June 8th election. And as you know, to gear up for an election of 500 people or 50,000 people, we need a lot of people. And there's not that many there's not difference in, that much of a difference in numbers. So if we're gearing up for a June election, yes, it's a little bit less staff, but if those elections are a week apart, there's no difference in staff. So that election is gonna be $3,000 to $5,000 for us just to staff, manage, and get things going. So they've been great in working with us. They've agreed to try to work with us to get everything in the week of May 3rd. So Tammy's staff and Hirsch can look at these and get these certified and back to you for a May 10th vote at this town council meeting. So if they're successful, the names will be on the ballot for June 8th for the recall. And then basically the next step happens. Our charter, I think, specifically was vague in the next two areas. So you can't reseat a counselor that's been recalled or a school board member that's been recalled. So you can't automatically just say, school board member John Smith was recalled. You know, as a council, we decided he's a good guy, we're gonna put him back in. That's not allowed. But a school board member who is running for a full term being the key, a 3-year term, has the right to basically stay on the ballot. So we have 2 school board vacancies this coming election. One member has chosen not to rerun, Margot Harrington, and one, Ann Maximovich, has basically said she is going to run again, so she's on the ballot. So the thought there was that if somebody is running for re-election, the public should have the ability to say, we want her in, or we want her out, or we want him in, or we want him out. And that's why I think you see that your charter says that you can run for a full term, but you can't be seated for a partially vacated term. So what happens after that? We'll just play the next scenario out. What happens if the recall is successful and if these 4 members do get recalled? The next step is not a special election, not an election at any time until next June. The town council seats the 4 remaining members. So if there are 4 vacancies, if our 4 people, the public says, yes, we agree with the petitioners, we would like to seat 4 new members. You as a town council, basically through your appointments process, will basically select 4 new members. They will be seated until next June, when those seats will come back onto the school ballot. So remember, we had 2 members that just got reelected or elected, and then you'll be looking at the next election, which will have 2 3-year terms and 2 1-year terms, because remember, the 2 people that ran this year have already served 1 year. A little bit of a math problem. It's, how many apples and how many Oreos and all that stuff. But it's pretty clean, and I think the charter lays it out pretty simply. So I did want to talk about that tonight. We're trying to figure out a way to convey this message in a way that people at home could understand, because as you remember, several years ago, we had Chuck Lawton and others do a study for us about how many homes in Cumberland actually had kids that went to the SAD. And at that time, there was only 1 in 4 homes, 25%. I believe that number is probably closer to 35% today, but it's not 50%. So 65% of us are still kind of in the dark about what's happening. So the message over the next few weeks on what's happening related to a recall has to be understood by the public, as well as what the petitioner's message is to that public. And I do want to share with the council, we'll be talking about our budget in a couple of weeks. Our budget right now is basically heading for a council vote on the 26th, and the entire county town and school board budget is up 1.5%. So the town is 0.5% or about 8 cents, and the school is about 22 cents of that, or 1% of the increase, the potential increase in taxes if that's approved. So what I'd like to do is obviously not link these two together if possible. I wish people would just do their homework and look at both scenarios separately, because personally I think this is a very responsible school budget in light of the times we're in. And you know what we went through as a town last year. To get to this budget, I think it demonstrates a lot of hard work and a lot of sacrifice for many people over the last year. So I'm fairly positive of where we're going. The next thing that my phone has blown up about has been, and I'll just talk about this because it's fairly quick, is basically signs. And signs have been getting more and more concerning. And what I will say is what the law says. Back in 2017, the Supreme Court ruled that municipalities and cities in particular, because they're the ones that started this a little bit, are not allowed to rule about sign content. So if I don't like the message, it doesn't matter. It's freedom of speech, and essentially you can put just about anything on a sign. I mean, I don't think vulgar language is permitted. I think there are some very small exceptions, but for the most part, you can just about put anything on a sign today. We had to redo our entire sign ordinance, as you remember, back in 2018, and that was led by the town attorney. And basically, political signs became non-commercial off-premise signs. And those signs are regulated by our ordinance to be allowed to be along public ways for a period of up to, I believe we regulated 6 weeks. The state basically came in and said the ones on state roads were regulated for 12 weeks. The town attorney has said, since our ordinance is stricter, there's a good possibility that we could even regulate those on state roads, and that's what she told me today. So I'm not really trying to push that here tonight, but I'm just trying to share that signs are regulated to an extent where we permit them on public roads, and on state roads, the state does nothing other than require name, address, phone number, and the date. The most important piece of information is the date the sign went up, because once 6 weeks expires, they're going to remove the sign. The state has come out with a policy that basically you can have signs up for 6 weeks from January 1st until June 30th, and then from July 1st until December 31st, you can have signs up for 6 weeks during that period as well. They didn't exactly coincide around the elections like they used to. You could used to be able to have signs out, I don't know, 45 or 60 days before an election, and that since has changed. The other piece that changed were the, well, didn't really change, but if you see signs in front of the town hall between now and the end of the month, I think it's around April 28th, that's okay. It never used to be okay. It was that we are a polling place, and signs were prohibited. Well, by state law, we're not a polling place until 42 days before the election. So that's April 28th. So signs can appear in front of town hall. To the credit of the folks that are here tonight, they were requested if they would move their signs back to the 250-foot setback that's going to be required on the 28th, and they obliged that morning. So I was very appreciative of that. And again, they have been very cooperative and very decent people to work with. More and more, the message is going to be extremely frustrating. I asked, out of frustration today, the town attorney, can we abolish all signs, period? Just say no more signs. Any public road in town, can we eliminate signs in totality? And she said, absolutely. You can do that as a council. And she said, just let me know when you want to go to Washington, D.C., because the Supreme Court is located there, and for 200 years you've been allowing this as a customary practice. So trying to defend this would be her honor, but she said, be prepared for a road trip, and she said it would be a difficult one to defend. So trying to eliminate it all. Unfortunately, civility has left us, and unfortunately, we haven't seen the worst yet. The worst is yet to come in the next few weeks, and I'm sad to see it. I'm sad to see it in Cumberland, and I'm just also sad to say that the law requires, regardless if you support these signs or support their candidacy, the folks that put these signs up have rights as well, and they are protected under state law. And if it is a crime to basically vandalize, steal, or damage in any way these signs while they're in the public right-of-way. So please refrain from that. That is someone's right just as much as it is your right to protest that. And what we'd ask is that you understand that until the laws are changed, which I don't see happening anytime soon, we ask that, basically people do the best they can. But I will share that it truly is going to get worse, because I've seen some of the signs that are going to be placed, and some are pretty large, and some are will be just bad, and not good for Cumberland, and not the way we do business. And we've always agreed to be civil, we've always agreed to be respectful, but what's next is not pretty. And this has to do more with the school board election than any other election that we have in front of us. So that's all I have. And as I said earlier before the meeting, one of the items tonight that I've asked you that you'll need to do is to suspend your rules for the addition of item 21045. It's to authorize the lease purchase of a town sweeper per the recommendation of the town attorney. At your last special meeting, you basically approved that lease purchase, but the attorney has informed us that there is a separate document that shows that you understand that this is part of your bond schedule and part of the indebtedness that is allowed under state law that you have to recognize, and that order also has to be authorized. So with your permission, I hope that you would add that to the end of your agenda tonight so that we can move forward on that purchase.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions of town manager? Seeing none, thank you again, Bill. Next item is public discussion. Brenda? Okay. Okay.
Public discussion is for comments on items that are not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes per person. Rebuttal comments will be limited to 2 minutes. Public discussion topics may be brought up again under new business for further council discussion.
Thank you, Brenda. Anybody for public discussion? Yes, Ann.
Good evening. My name is Ann Maximovich, and I live on Tuttle Road. Before I begin, I just wanted to say that my face is the one that's probably going to show up on the signs that Mr. Shane is speaking of, and I have committed for every sign that is installed around town, I will donate to Prince Memorial Library, I will donate to our community food pantry, I will donate to Maine Boys to Men, and I will donate back to the school district. And we are having community members also join in and match those donations, because I think it's just really unfortunate that someone might make that decision. And even if the signs don't go up, I will still follow through and make my pledge. The only thing that I just wanted to ask tonight was, I know on the school board's budget, we had to raise our legal fees due to FOIAs. So I'm wondering how much town council spent on legal fees responding to FOIAs last year, and if you had to raise your legal fee on the line item for the budget of next year.
We did not have to raise our line item for our budget for next year. It's the same as it was this current year. The FOIAs in particular to the issues around the school board, or just in general to FOIA statements? Because we get FOIAs all the time on a whole bunch of other things. We probably spend 10% of our budget on FOIA, so that's a pretty small amount. But with this particular topic, probably about $1,500 in legal fees. Most of the discussions and the legal bills were saved because Jeff and I were talking back and forth, And if he was asking the question to your attorney, I wasn't asking the same question. So that basically cut down on our expenses, but your FOIAs were much more, more intense and a lot more information than what was requested of the town.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ann. Any public discussion item? Seeing none, we would move on to
Oh, we have
next item.
We have
Ron.
someone stepping
Oh,
up.
I'm sorry.
Okay, if this is about the fairgrounds item, that's not on the agenda yet.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Brenda, next item?
21-037, to consider an act on approval of a work plan for the Lands and Conservation Commission for FY 2022.
Mike, you want to take this? For those that are listening and or watching on TV, the Conservation Commission made a terrific presentation prior to our council meeting tonight. So, Mike, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The presentation earlier at the workshop kind of laid out everything we were planning to work on, and short of rehashing everything, I ask that you either that you approve it and give us some more guidance in, if you will, in the farmland area, and if there's something you feel that we are missing that should be moved up to a higher priority, that you let us know so that we can work it into our work schedule, and we'll go from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike. Any input from the council? Seeing none. Anything from the public? Seeing none. I'm going to ask for a motion. Shirley?
Well, I just want to congratulate the Lands and Conservation Commission for very thoughtful work and an ambitious plan, and I wish you the best in accomplishing your goals and the remainder of this calendar year, and appreciate your service and time and commitment to our public lands. So I would move that we approve the Lands and Conservation Commission work plan for fiscal year 2022.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Ron, second. Further discussion?
I
All
would
in
echo,
favor?
I would echo Shirley's comments.
Okay.
Job well done.
It sure is.
Well done.
All in favor? Thank you. Unanimous, Brenda. Next item?
21-038, to hold a public hearing to consider an act on a mass gathering permit from Fast Track Investments for harness racing events at the Cumberland Fairgrounds.
And Mr. Chairman, Town Clerk Tammy O'Donnell will give you an overview of the permit and the information received to date. We do have staff here from the fairgrounds, as well as Mike Chinquette from First Track Investments. So Tammy will start us off.
Thanks, Tammy.
You're welcome. Good evening. I met with Mr. Chinquette, owner of First Track Investments, on March 17th, along with Lyle Merrifield, the president of the Cumberland Farmers Club, along with Chief Rumsey and Chief Small from the Cumberland Fire Department. And Mr. Chinquette very graciously went over everything about the agreement with the Cumberland Farmers Club in detail, which was quite a bit that really was over my head, but we discussed everything. And we discussed the requirements of the mass gathering permit, and he really does not meet the guidelines for a mass gathering permit. He simply is filling out one I think, to be gracious to the town. It's certainly not a requirement, but he is doing so. I will have it on file. He does not expect the attendance to meet the limits, not even by half of the required amount. And I think it's very much a goodwill gesture. And I think that everything that he has proposed, it meets every requirement of a mass gathering permit. I will let him speak after I'm done speaking. I think he will do a much better job presenting everything. He can give you the details in full. There will be 56 races beginning in May, and then they will stop in July and start again in late October, November, and December. They'll all be held during daylight hours. And they expect the attendance to be around 200 people per race. Races will be around 4 hours per day, and 7 to 9 races on any given day. They will use the Bruce Hill Extension exit, and speakers, he will make every effort to turn them toward the grandstand so that the noise will be kept to a minimum for neighbors. So at this point, I would invite Mr. Chinket up so that if you have any questions, you could certainly ask Mr. Chinket.
Thank you, Tammy.
Mike?
I mean, I'm not sure I'll do any better, but, because she always sets the bar quite high. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. I know many of you. My name is Michael Chinket. I live on Wynn Road. I've come here before as part of Pine Ridge Acres, the old Merrill Farm, which, as you all know, we run. But I'm here today on behalf of First Tracks Investments, another entity that has reached an agreement with the Cumberland Farmers Club. Lyle Merrifield, the new president, is here today as well, should you have any questions for him. But the long and short of it is, I think everyone knows, and certainly in this part of the state, that the historic track, Scarborough Downs, was sold several years ago and is undergoing a very rigorous and very sudden development program. With that, this year, the prior operators of the track elected not to pursue licensure. From conversations with folks involved with the Downs, we understand that because they're developing it, and they're going to be into the track fairly soon. Obviously, Maine Health has taken over the old grandstand as a COVID vaccination site, and harness racing is simply not able to be accommodated with everything else going on there. So with that, as certainly many members of the council and many members of the public know, harness racing has a long and storied history in our state, and is a major driver of a lot of our agricultural heritage and hopefully our agricultural future. One of the things we've been working on over the past several years, together with the Maine Harness Horsemen Association and the Maine Standardbred Breeders Association, is the opportunity to bring a new permanent facility online. That's not the Cumberland Farmers Club. That's not what we're here proposing today. We're working on that, trying to secure some parcels of land of sufficient size to be able to do it correctly and build a facility, a modern first-class facility that not only can host harness racing, but a lot of other outdoor events. I think the world in the past year has taught us the importance of socially distanced events and areas where people may gather while keeping their distance, and a harness horse track is one such thing. So with that, I had spoken with the town manager several months ago as we approached and had conversations with the Farmers Club to talk about zoning and what regulatory requirements the town may have. We sat down together at his desk with masks and looked through the ordinance, and essentially it was the zone there is fairly wide open for things historically affiliated with the Farmers Club grounds. And that includes harness racing. As many of us know, as many of us have attended the fair over years and years and years, we see the horses run around. So with that, we reached agreement with the Farmers Club. We applied for licensure with the State Harness Racing Commission and received that license. And again, while I don't have any expectation that we'll be anywhere north of 500 people during events. I did want to make sure that the town was engaged in this conversation, and certainly, find ways to be a good neighbor. I have spoken with Joanne Fryer, who obviously I do know. She did tell me that there's going to be a cop story wedding at some point this summer, so the clans will be united, and we'll see where that leads. But again, the objective here, this isn't Fair Week, this isn't Churchill Downs, this isn't the Kentucky Derby. This is really an opportunity for the Maine harness horsemen and the horsewomen to continue to race, to pull down purse funds that are escrowed from casino revenue in Bangor, and earn their winnings, earn their purses, to be able to keep buying hay, shoeing horses, and keeping the tradition alive for hopefully many generations yet to come. So with that, again, I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have, and certainly any questions other folks have. But the intent is for this to be a very limited impact, and candidly, while I certainly would encourage everyone to come out and see it, I don't expect it to be a mass gathering as the ordinance defines it, or as common sense would. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike?
Just one comment and then one question. Mike, I'm very impressed with the willingness for you to have an open discussion with the people that not only might be opposed it, but have concerns, and that really, I think, is great. I think you've done a really good job in communicating with them, even if they disagree with you in the end. The fact you've kept the line of communication open is great. My question to you is, how important is this? I was looking at your schedule. How important is Cumberland to keeping the health of harness racing open for the next year or so?
It's critical. The challenge for the harness horsemen is cash flow, as any business, and certainly that's what it is in part. It's also a passion for many of them. So without Cumberland, certainly I know some of the other fairs have said, well, geez, we might be able to do a couple more races here or there. I know Bangor has said, well, geez, we might be able to do a little bit more here or there. But the reality is, running those races through the summer, and again, one thing I should mention too, my intent was, and I think I put it on the application, is to, whether it's necessary or not, is to cover down on this permit kind of for these summer races, and then come back to this council for those winter races. Because if there's anything that needs to be filed off, if there's anything we need to improve, I want to have that other conversation, even if the ordinance doesn't require it, because we want this to be right. But the reality is, without these races, I don't want to oversell it, but harness racing would have a hard time surviving to get to that new track, which is, again, that was really our impetus to try to make this work, to help the horsemen stay strong and viable, and the breeders and everyone else to get to that next stage.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Shirley?
I'm going to date myself here a little bit. 45 years ago, I worked for a company called Howard's Horse Supply. And I do believe it was a grandfather or a
Great uncle.
Great uncle.
Great uncle.
Was one of our top customers. And I was like, this family's been in this business a very long time. I have also spoken with Joanne, I keep wanting to call her Joanne Fryer, and she said that you have addressed her concerns about sound. And she did say that Tim's and Christie's wedding would be the signal of whether that was going to work or not.
I'm going to bring a betting table over for that wedding, I think.
Can I use a loudspeaker?
I know. Well, the stories are the Loud family, so they don't need speakers. But do you have any speakers on the far side of the track, or will they all be sort of in the?
So I believe there's still a couple there, and they'll be there for safety purposes.
Okay.
So if a judge, or if there's a horse that has an obstruction or something like that, they'll be available to call to drivers. But they're not going to be, it's not Fair Week where they're competing with the Midway and the concerts and everything else. It's really just that activity.
Okay. All right.
Bob?
I wish you well, Mike.
Thank you.
when you live beside something that changes, and you live beside an industrial zone, you live beside a commercial zone, you're always, in the back of your head, you're always, there's a small degree of discomfort, of the unknown. And certainly saw that when Main Street Auto proposed their venue there. And, having grown up with Harry Holster and Ronnie Moon running a gas station down there was a certain degree of comfort because you knew the owners and you could get down there and deal directly with them. And when C.M. Brown came in there was a corporation that really didn't have any ties to Cumberland. And so we're got a watch and see what happens. And, I know that we'll find out quickly if it doesn't go well, and you will too. But anyways, best wishes. I think that you understand what's at stake here, and the community does too.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. Allison?
I just had a question on making sure I'm interpreting the calendar correctly that's on here. So obviously the ones that say Bangor are planned to be in Bangor, right? And so is it all the ones that say First Tracks? Those are the ones that are planned for Cumberland?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct.
Perfect, thank you. And I guess I echo Bob, the transparency and kind of forthcoming of, not just following the rules, but doing what you think is right, even if not required. Very much appreciate that. And also doing it in its bite sizes so that we can kind of learn and adjust and determine if we're sitting with the same assumptions come this winter. So appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
George, anything?
No.
Okay. Ron?
I think this is a good thing. This is not anything new to the Cumberland Fairgrounds. I've been here for almost 59 years now. I'll just run down through some names that some people will remember. Donnie Richards, Bob Allen, Lauren Norton, Jerry Smith, all people from this community in Falmouth that raced horses there when I was a small child. And I can remember there being races all summer long there when I was a kid. And there was never any problem there, and I look forward to this. I think it's a good venture for the fairgrounds. I think it will bring some livelihood back into that end of town, so I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Those were races under the lights, too. They used to.
Oh, yeah,
Have
they
lit
used to race
tracks,
at
yeah.
night, so
Yeah.
yep.
I did want to share that also that I did get a call from a concerned citizen, and I know we're going to open it up for public discussion, but before we do that, one citizen did. And are there any, like, if you buy a lottery ticket, it gives you advice to who to call if you have a gambling addiction. Are there signs posted around the track for those kind of disclaimers, or?
There will be information available on that, and again, it is, obviously, as it should be, a highly regulated industry, so the
Right.
state does have, they've got a litany of requirements for the pari-mutuel wagering, so I can't tell you specifically what size paper there has to be, but I do know
Right.
we have making
I
sure.
suspect it because they
Yep.
regulate, the Maine State Lottery. It's
Yep.
also a state-regulated industry, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
George?
I guess, Mike, I have to thank you for your candidness and your particular focus on the fact that the noise, I think you realize, from neighbors was probably the most prevalent concern. And your attitude toward this whole process is phenomenal. I just have to interject that the availability of gambling online, if you can gamble and bet on the Kentucky Derby and have about 15 or 20 that I know of sites. I don't personally indulge in that kind of gambling, but I guess what I'm saying is it's available out there, and people who have an addiction are going to find those sources. So this might be a little healthier place for them to let off their excess tendencies that way. So congratulations to you.
Thank you. Well, and I want to give Lyle and the Cumberland Farmers Club, all the directors and all the members credit as well, because obviously it's their track, and, you know, they're gracious enough to find a way to make it work. And, you know, they're obviously a longtime citizens of this town, both directly and as an organization. And so I appreciate that, but I want to make sure they share in the credit. And if there's any blame, I'll take that. They don't get any of that.
Thank you.
I'd just like to point out to George that their initial day is Derby Day, so if you do feel inclined to bet for horse racing on May 8th.
That's the only horse
that's-
race I ever bet on, is the Kentucky Derby, Shirley.
That's their first day of racing.
This is a public discussion. Anybody else?
Hello, my name's Karen Harold. I live at 241 Blanchard, that's the end of the driveway. It's about half a mile from the fairgrounds. First, I want to say that's great that the permit process is going to be followed. I didn't realize that. I think that's very, very helpful. But I'm here because I'm concerned about how many days this is. I know this harness racing is allowed under the fairgrounds overlay. But, you know, circuses are allowed. If one day Barnum and Bailey wanted to put their season on the fairgrounds, you know, you would know that is a big change in what the neighbors are used to and have come to expect. I've been here in my land since 1994, so that's 27 years. And every summer we have the fair and there's racing, and then there are a few more one-off events, and they're all charming and wonderful, and I don't mind the noise a bit. But it's not 56 additional days. So this really has me concerned. If it's just 2 years, you know, we can deal with that. That's okay. I'm concerned that it could draw out, you know, for a period of time. And I just want to suggest to the town council that they might consider looking at the fairgrounds overlay ordinance and perhaps limit the number of times an event can happen. You know, some sort of compromise between the needs of the neighbors and the people who live on the access routes who will have the increased traffic. Maybe the sky shouldn't be the limit, you know? Some sort of guidance would be extremely helpful. You're our only buffer against any bad effects that can happen. I mean, it sounds like they won't be that bad. I mean, there's going to be more traffic, and that does have an effect on the neighborhood. So 56 days is what's really got me worried. I'm not against harness racing. 56 days is what I'm concerned about. So I would appreciate your considering that. And it sounds like you're going to take note of anything that goes wrong and concerns and ideas that people might have. Please do keep a good record, and I'm pleased that you're going to relook at this before the winter dates come up, and I would hope you take it very seriously that the neighbors don't universally love the fact that this is happening. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Shirley?
I'm sorry to belabor this, but I was wondering if perhaps Kyle might come to the podium. I know we see, I think I can speak for most of us, we see the Cumberland Fairgrounds as an important member of our community. They and an important part of our agricultural history. And their success is important, I think, to all of us. And I worry about I know they've struggled in years past, and not having the fair this year and not being able to have things like the Craftsman's Fair and things like that have made the economics of maintaining a fairgrounds even more viable. So I don't think it's in any of our interest for them to go under. And I'm not saying if they don't get this, they go under. But I see this as a way to sort of turn around or maybe even recoup some of the losses of the last year. And maybe you could address sort of where you guys are at
I can try, and thanks,
Okay.
thanks for listening, Chairman and council members. Certainly, you hit on some key points that we haven't brought in a lot of revenues that we normally do.
Carol, can you state your name, please?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm Lyle Merrifield, and I'm president of the Cumberland Farmers Club.
Thank you.
Certainly, we haven't brought in the revenues that we normally do in the last year, a little over a year. We felt as though when this came along, it was a good fit. It fit well in the fairgrounds. I mean, the infrastructure basically was all already there. So we felt that part was good. And certainly, once hearing the concerns from the neighbors, we're all about making them comfortable and whatever it takes. And as far as the noise from the speakers, I think Mike hit on that as well, that speakers during the week of the fair certainly are competing with a lot of other noise, so they don't need to be nearly as loud. So I think that'll be addressed, and I think they'll be comfortable with that. But certainly, in the Farmers Club and the directors and officers, we are always looking for things that are gonna make ends meet for us, because we have a lot of buildings to take care of, we have a lot of property to take care of. And if we don't keep it active as a fair and a fairgrounds, pieces of that will start slipping away on us. Just a note, everybody in the room probably knows Link Merrill, but he did a little quick history for us, and a year or so ago, and we were looking through some things, and in the late 50s, there was 3 different horse meets, spring, summer, and fall at the Cumberland Fairgrounds, and it brought in just under $600,000. So that was, that was phenomenal. But, of course, back in those days, that was about the only thing to bet on, probably, so it brought big crowds. But so certainly we know that horse racing, built that fairgrounds, and we're hoping it's gonna help us hang on and keep moving forward.
Okay. So I just wanted, Karen, to sort of give you kind of that history of that thought. And when we're looking at this from the 50,000, we certainly don't want that to be sold and developed, for example, into housing or whatever. So it's important to the entire community, I think, that we
Yeah,
support.
and I don't want to imply that we're even close to that.
No, and I don't want to
Not while I'm
either.
president, so.
I know, and I don't want to do that,
Right,
but.
right.
But I think in today's economic world, we have to be mindful of other possibilities.
Right. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Carl.
Welcome. Thank you.
Other comments?
We'll try this again. My name is Jeff Coombs. I live on Blanchard Road, about a half a mile from the fairgrounds. My comments certainly are going to support the fairgrounds. We know the fairgrounds has been there many, many years. They're generally a good neighbor. We try to be good neighbors to the fairground. We understand that it's an important thing in the town, it's an important thing in the county, it's very important to the agricultural community because it supports, hay, horses, fodder, everything, is a good thing for the fairgrounds. My concern, however, does relate to the noise level. I gave Bill, the town manager here, a little project that I did last night, and I took Google Maps and I took a half-a-mile circle around the grandstand, and I counted the number of households that are within that half-mile radius. There's 64 households within that half-mile radius. Now, if you were to take that and extend it to 3/4 of a mile, there'd be easily double that number of households. That would then start to take in much more of Mill Road, Range Road. It would start to take in a lot more of Bruce Hill Road, and those houses, as you know, are house right down the line. So there are quite a few people who are, affected by this. During the fair, I'm about a half a mile away, And I understand that the noise level is high because the speakers are at a high level. They have to get above the crowd noise. But I can easily hear every word on the loudspeaker 1/2 mile away. Okay. So we certainly hope that it is at a lower level. But I do think that it is reasonable for the town to specify something about the noise level in the permit. Not to wait until it becomes a problem, but to specify it up front what the noise level should or could be. Now, I did a little bit of research on how that could be done. Okay, rather than just dump a problem out here, I did do a little bit of work on that, and there is a lot of information on the internet about noise levels, because it's very critical in industrial settings, in municipal settings. There's all kinds of information on noise levels. Apparently the device that monitors the noise level is called a sound level meter. And I looked that up on Amazon. There's probably 30 available between $20 and $200. So anybody can get a sound level meter and easily get the decibel levels. There's also a free app that's available for smartphones. You can put it right on your phone, and you can hold your phone up and get the noise level. My suggestion is, rather than just leave it to the goodwill of the applicant and hope for the best, that possibly a suggestion is that the code enforcement officer, town manager, or any other municipal official could go out there and turn on the speakers and determine what would be an acceptable level. Simply hold the meter up and say, okay, that's about right, and then specify in the permit such and such level on the meter. Okay, it's 65 decibels. That's the acceptable level at wherever point in the radius from the loudspeakers. The other way to do it, that's even simpler than that, is to simply go and turn on the microphone and turn it up until it gets to a point where it's objectionable, and then specify it as a microphone level, that the microphone will not be at a point greater than, let's say, 4 or whatever. Then it's spelled out. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing with a project such as this. If I came to the code enforcement officer for a building permit, I would have a lot of spelled out terms on that building permit. With 64 households, affected by this project, I don't think it's unreasonable to actually spell out a noise level, whether it's a sound level meter or a microphone or whatever. And, the applicant may be very happy with that number, and then if there's any problems, then the code enforcement officer can check the level. It isn't, then we're not gonna be arguing what's too loud, the neighbor think it's too loud. There's a number that can be checked. It's either above or below 65 decibels. That's it. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing. The other thing I wanted to say briefly, I know I have a short time and I don't want to go over, about the loudspeaker arrangements. I live close by and I walk by the fairgrounds frequently, and there are 6 large cone speakers that are attached to the grandstand. These are big cones. They're about this big, and they're pointed in all directions, and they're set up for the fair, obviously. I don't believe that that is absolutely necessary under this condition. I believe, I don't know the exact plans, but I believe the crowd would be close by in the grandstand or close near the grandstand. In that case, the loudspeakers could be changed from the 6 big ones up there to 2 or 3 small box speakers.
Mr. Chairman, 5 minutes.
Okay, I'm just about done. And in that case, then there would not be a noise problem. So I've said I support the fairgrounds, and racing is important, but I do believe that the 64 households should be protected, and I believe that's the town council's responsibility. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Other comments? Anything else?
Good evening, I'm Mark Isaacson. I live on Blanchard Road, again about a half a mile from the fairgrounds. Wanted to begin by saying that I'm a firm believer in the right of any person to do whatever they want with their private property, but I'm also a firm believer in the principle that you shouldn't use your property in a way that interferes with other people. The problem in the world today is that there's almost nothing that you can do with your property that doesn't interfere with someone to some extent. And therefore, somebody has to decide how much is too much. And in this case, that somebody is you, the town council. And I would posit the proposition to you that maybe 56 days is just too much. We heard from Mr. Chinchette that they'd gone around the state looking for locations, and various locations had offered, to expand their schedule, a few days here, a few days there, and so on. So I ask you, why is it that those towns, cities, could offer a couple days, but somehow Cumberland is offering 56 days? It just doesn't seem quite fair, especially to those of us that are going to have to live with the noise and the traffic. Unfortunately, or a lot of this is going to happen in the summertime when we're outdoors a lot of the time, or the windows are open to catch the breeze, and the noise of the fairgrounds and the track will come drifting in on the breeze. It's also the time when people are out and about on the roads, walking, running, and riding, or like me, riding their bicycles. And again, the traffic is an issue. So I ask you to consider the proposal that was just made to have some realistic limit on the noise amount that can be measured. Measuring noise is not rocket science. It can be done. And typically, the noise, in my experience, noise limits are set at the property line. So I would ask you to investigate that, and if possible, include a noise criterion in any permit that you might issue. Finally, I would make just one personal request, and that is that I have experienced in the past during Fair Week and other times that it's common for the police department or public safety to erect a string of cones down the center line of Blanchard Road, I guess to warn motorists and to slow them down and to help the pedestrians crossing the road. It may help the pedestrians, but that is a safety measure that's very hazardous to cyclists. It prevents cars from crossing the median line to give you a wide berth and forces them to be on your shoulder. So I would ask that you give a second thought before you put those out. It's purely personal cyclist request. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Thanks, Mark. Any questions of Mark? That's none. Allison?
I just have, Mr. Chincat, so I know you're coming to us with just the May through July, but realistically, right, you're expecting that we would come back and approve the others with maybe tweaks to proposal, right? Like First Tracks is kind of setting their schedule, so are we naive to think that we'd really have the opportunity to say, no, thank you?
His application actually was for his whole season.
Oh.
He did through the May through July and October through December.
Oh, it says the and?
And Allison, we need to remember that this can go forward without us.
Right, and
Because it doesn't meet the criteria for
Correct.
a mass gathering ordinance. So we're more or less consulting and giving our our input and trying to help advocate for the neighbors, to make sure that we hear that people are concerned about the number of days and people are concerned about the noise.
Yes, sir, can you state your name?
Yes, David Daigle, Bruce Hill Road. When I first heard about this, I immediately started to research the hell out of it, which is what I always do. And I found that in the 50s and 60s, there were a dozen huge racetracks in New England. And they're all gone, except for two, Bangor and Plainfield, Mass., which are both subsidized by casinos. Seems to be a very difficult business to be self-sustaining. And I applaud this gentleman for trying that. I also found an article on something called Harness Racing Update, which was quite detailed about this proposal. And that he is trying, or his group is trying to do this without going the casino route. But he's definitely going the gambling route. And one of the things that this, and I don't mean that there's off-track betting, there is simulcasting. The state legislature last year approved sports betting, and Governor Mills vetoed it. But of course, that was prior to the pandemic. So that may come forward again. And I think the horse racing is a great idea. I walk by that fairgrounds constantly. I see the people working really hard in those barns. I see the guys riding around the tracks. They get bored enough that they run the other way just to do something different. I think it would be great to have racing there. And I think I have no problem with that. I'm concerned about phase 2. And my concern is that somebody will come to this meeting to say, we need something on the days we're not racing, whether it be off-track betting, something where we have revenue to help support the racing, but on days when we don't race. And that's what Scarborough Downs was. You go by their place, and there's a sign there that says open 363 days a year. Racing a few days, and a lot of bar, simulcast, off-track betting. And as a neighbor, that's what I'm concerned about, is somehow we wake up one day, and there's a gambling building at the street. And we don't know how it got there. It just kind of gradually came in. And that concerns me. So the racing, I think, is great. But I don't know where the stop is. I heard somebody talk about the fairgrounds overlay. I don't know what that means. But is there something, what can be put in? Because I don't think a gambling business is allowed in an RR2 zone. But are there ways to move that? So, thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Bill?
It would seem like I didn't tell my name, but it is Bill Stiles from Range Road. I'm a member of the Farmers Club, so.
Do you have a street named after you?
Huh?
Do you have a road named after you?
Somebody said something like that. It's in Wyndham, I think. I've been around the fairgrounds for a long time. My father had racehorses there and raced them. As kids, I've driven them. So I appreciate horse racing. One of the problems you have to consider, your 56 races, what are we talking about? 90 days? So, it's not a race every day. But following on that, let's just think of the big picture, which nobody's ever talked about. It was mentioned just a little bit here. The fairgrounds has to be a viable entity going on. So it has to have something that draws in enough money to pay the bills and some of the taxes it pays. The fairgrounds does pay some taxes. So If it's not something like this racing business, what is it going to be? Now, I feel quite certain it won't be a casino, because I don't believe that's allowed in that overlay district. But it's going to be something. Is it going to be parade demonstrations? Is it going to be band practices where they have large horns and so forth? Sound all the way around is a problem. We just heard the train go by here a minute ago. I hear traffic from the interstate. I know Shirley has the same problems down her way with traffic from the interstate. We can't do that. We heard the proprietor here state that they're going to do everything they can to make the sound great. But let's not forget that sooner or later something else is going to come along, and we're going to have to bend, and we're going to depend upon your wisdom to allow or not allow it. But we need something to keep that the way we all remembered it, and for what the agricultural purposes that go on. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments? Anything not related to the fairgrounds? Okay.
Tom,
George?
I'd just like to say something. I grew up in Yarmouth for a few years back in the 50s and into the 60s, and I remember the fairgrounds, and I remember the racing and so on. And my wife and I moved back here 40 years ago to Cumberland, and I guess what occurs to me is that I think it's not unreasonable to hope that 60 decibels or 65 decibels at property lines ideally could make some sense. I don't know whether Mark Chinchetta has an opinion about whether that's possible to achieve. When I was on the appeals board for years and years, the special exception criteria always pointed out 60 decibels, and what we had to deal with was daycare centers. And the concern of the neighbors always was, what's the sound level going to be? And sometimes, especially the older neighbors, were happy to hear the kids playing outside, and others weren't so delighted. But it would be nice if a rule of thumb could take place that a certain number of decibels would be acceptable. And in my opinion, you could make it 70 or 80 decibels at property lines. I think even on that level, people would be happy, but it would be great if we could have some level that was acceptable from the Farmers Club and Mark's point of view. But for us to try to mandate such a thing just isn't going to happen, because this is a permitted use, and the owners are being very forthcoming about being willing to put themselves forward to do everything they can to make sure that any negative effect is minimized. But I think the decibel level thing, it would be nice if we could come up with some level that made some sense.
Sure, yeah, thank you. And you know, certainly the trick with coming up with a firm number right now as a rule of thumb is because the Farmers Club, you know, they do rent out quite a bit of storage in the barns and the grandstand and so forth through the winter. Folks are starting to collect things and open them up now. So over the next, as those things open back up and we're able to really turn on and tune the system, we do have to get authorization and a blessing from some of the state regulators, because again, part of the PA function during a harness race is for safety. You know, if a sulky loses a wheel, if there's a danger to animal or human health, they need to be able to draw attention quickly. But again, I certainly think once we turn that on and kind of get the state's A-OK on it, again, my intent is to make sure that's as minimal as possible for the neighbors, and certainly, you know, should any council member or the town manager or someone else want to have a further conversation on that, I'm happy to come right back here and work through that if I can't solve it with the folks who are directly impacted. As I think as Councilor Story King mentioned, you know, I know Joanne and Greg Fryer fairly well personally. And I've given her my word that we're going to do everything we can to make sure this works well from Oakfield Farm, for the Cumberland Farmers Club, for the Horsemen, and for the town of Cumberland.
And I realize, Mike, and I think everybody does, that you can't come up with a fixed number on an issue like that because somebody comes out with a meter. For one thing, it should be over a period of time that would have to be registered, not just to have somebody come out and say, oh, it went over whatever the arbitrary number is, would be asinine. There's no way it could be enforced, even if you were willing to live with the enforcement. But it just is too bad that some benchmark can't be found in some way or another, and maybe over time that can happen.
Yep.
Other comments? Shirley?
I just did some math and looking at their calendar sort of makes me less concerned about the noise. More than half of their race dates are in November and December. And I'm not sure. I don't keep my windows open in November and December, maybe a little bit if it's cool outside, you know, but I don't want to make this something that it isn't, getting concerned about the noise. I mean, 27 days in April, May, and June. Oh, no, May, June, and July.
Yep.
July. And then 7 days in September with the Cumberland Fair, which would happen anyway, and then 29 days in December and November, so it's, I don't know. I don't like the noise either. I don't like the noise of the highway, but it does make me feel a little better that 29 of those days are in the winter.
And if I'm understanding right, there's no lights, so you're done at
Correct.
dusk in the winter, just as if you would in the summer, so we're talking 12 to 3:30.
Yeah, and part of that is again, the impetus behind a lot of this is to make sure the horsemen can run, because if they don't run a state-sanctioned race, they can't win a purse. And if they can't win a purse, they don't have any revenue.
And I don't want to diminish, right? I think you've heard a lot of not just nostalgia, but respect for the city, for the history around this in our town. But I think also we are acknowledging and recognizing that we're kind of the residential development that's happened since that time too. And so I don't want those that are here to think we're completely disregarding it. I think Shirley outlined kind of, we're looking at mitigating factors and kind of the forthcomingness so far and willingness, and we're kind of taking that, I think, speak for those, but like with faith that this is showing a behavior that as feedback is given throughout the season, we are kind of moving forward with the good faith that communication would continue and to the best of everyone's ability, as long as we're forthcoming, that we can continue to make this hopefully a win-win-win.
Absolutely.
Ron had a comment or question.
Just to keep everything on track here, Mr. Chinchet is here out of courtesy. He could have filled this room with horsemen tonight from any other town in the state of Maine saying that they think this is the greatest thing, but he didn't opt to do that. He's here in front of the residents of the town of Cumberland explaining what he wants to do, which is a permitted use, and he wants everybody to know how it's going to go down. I think we actually owe him something, that he's very, very grateful to the people of the town of Cumberland. But I commend you for coming forward to do this. I mean, it's a permitted use. He's laying everything out. He's trying to be, he wants to make this work. That's all I have.
Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are a lot of things I heard tonight that I think the council can address pretty easily. All our uses are defined by our ordinance, so a casino is not allowed in the overlay zone, but most people that don't deal with this every day don't know what is and what isn't. So to change those uses, it would require the council as well as the planning board. This is a land use ordinance, has to go through the planning board. So there's about 3 different bites at the apple if there are additional uses that were ever proposed for this area. We do have
Aren't.
what's that?
And there aren't, just like there aren't plans to sell the fairgrounds.
No,
There aren't
but,
plans
but,
to turn
you know,
it-
but
Yeah.
ordinances changes, you know, things change every day. So, I mean, there could be, next meeting, somebody could have something, a request before you. So I don't want to basically cast it in stone in any way. Decibel levels, we do have a decibel meter that can measure that, and we can do that pretty easily as staff. And I don't think that's an unreasonable request. It'd be kind of interesting to see what actually these speakers do produce, and it is at the property line. So we'll look to see, you know, where the closest butters are and where the closest homes are to kind of hone in on that area. If this is successful and it does reach a much higher level of participation, they will have to come to you with a real mass gathering permit. So while they're not expecting that to happen this season, I think that, you know, in hopes that it might, maybe next year. And if there are other restrictions that you as a council want to propose, you can do that. We had to explain we don't have enough EMTs to cover all those dates, so maybe some of those dates they may have to contract out for those services, and that's required by the Harness Racing Association. And then the last thing is the traffic conditions will be enforced and monitored by our police department. And if they see that we need to do more whatever on Bruce Hill Road, we will. I didn't really even think about the cones and the hazard they do produce, but those gaps can be spread out so people can have an ability to slide over one way or the other, because I think we all do it anyway. So all of those issues that were raised tonight are easily issues to address by staff and to get back and report back to the council. So we'll take note of those tonight and get back to you and let you know in the future. I do appreciate working with Mike and with Lyle. They both basically rolled up their sleeves and say, you know, how can we make this work? And we explained they didn't have to be here, but they chose to be here tonight, and I think that does speak very highly of their character and their willingness to collaborate with our community. So it's a good partnership. I think we can learn something, and we'll keep you posted as this moves forward.
Thanks, Bill. Any other questions of Bill?
Would you like a motion?
When you're ready.
Let's have a motion. Mike?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the mass gathering permit from First Track Investments for harness racing events at the Cumberland Fairground.
Second.
Ron has a second. Further discussion? All in favor?
Further discussion?
No further discussion?
This motion in of itself is misleading, because it's not we're really not approving a mass gathering permit. This is, so I think we should, you know, make note of that. We are acknowledging the work that's been done by the applicant, and we're also acknowledging that there is some work to be done, and I'd like to acknowledge that we heard the residents, and we'll be taking that upon ourselves to maybe make some adjustments as we go forward. But I want to make sure that, you know, everybody knows that I think we heard the concerns of the residents. We understand the implications to the Farmers Club to have a viable income stream, and we're going to watch it carefully.
I would not agree with you, Councilor Vail. I think it has been advertised as a public hearing for a mass gathering. While they don't reach that threshold, we did go through all the criteria of the mass gathering as part of their application process to make sure they could meet those, and they could be, primarily because it was a small crowd. But if things should change, I would ask you then to maybe ask them to return if there are things that are not consistent with the mass gathering. I struggled with this too, Bob. I almost basically said, don't come, because they don't reach that threshold, but they chose to come before you and ask you if there are any concerns. And I think we have listed those, and I think we can work with the fairgrounds to see if we can mitigate those if they are a bigger issue. But I guess what I would ask you, what would happen if they got to, 550 or 600 people? Would you expect them to return for another public hearing, for another mass gathering permit, for a permitted use in that zone? it would be no different than a bigger event coming in. And that's my concern. I struggled with the same thing, Bob, so I know what you're saying, and I know and I felt the same way for a period of time, but where they asked to be basically put on because they couldn't stop in the middle of the season. So they basically said, we don't expect to be that high of a level, but it's a safety net for it, just as much for us as it is for the town. So that's kind of, tonight, I think it is a public hearing, and I think it is for a mass gathering, and if they don't reach the threshold, great. If they do, we will try to work with them to tweak any problems we see along the way. Yeah, it's a tough one. It really is. The town attorney basically said they really shouldn't be before you, but they're doing this as a safety net for their, because it could be successful. I think Ron is right. I said, people, if it's a nice afternoon, people might want to go up and watch the races. And, what happens if it hits 6:01? And now what? And I think that's why they're here before you tonight.
Okay, Bob?
What's our?
We have a motion. I do want to say one thing, Ron, that Roger Young should be in a member of that name. Okay. That's all I have to say, okay. We have a motion, we have a second. All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Thank you. Next item?
21-039, to hold a public hearing to consider an act on a credit enhancement agreement for Lakeside concrete cutting and abatement professionals as recommended by the TIF Committee.
Mr. Chairman, tonight, the TIF Committee recommended that you approve a credit enhancement agreement. For those that don't understand what that is, it is essentially an enticement for the town to attract a business here to one of our business zones. Tonight, we have one of the owners of Lakeside Concrete. Ryan, is he still here? Sorry. And if you have any questions, he'd be happy to answer those questions. This is a company that would be looking to relocate in the Heritage Village area along Route 1, which is very close to the property line, the town line of Falmouth and Cumberland. It would be on Lot 3. The plans are in your packet tonight, and be happy to answer any specific questions. Members of the TIF Committee are here as well. That could, I think that's you, Mr. Chairman, Councilor Turner, and Councilor Kopp that heard the proposal and reviewed this and agreed that the credit enhancement agreement for 50% of their property taxes for up to, I think it's 17 years remaining in that TIF district, or $500,000, whichever comes first, be approved tonight. This company, as you see in your packet, has, I think it's over 80 different jobs that will be related to this company, and they're looking at concrete cutting as well as abatement. So.
Open to public discussion. Anybody have anything? Have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll give you a motion.
Thank you, Ron.
I move to approve a credit enhancement agreement for Lakeside concrete cutting and abatement professionals as recommended by the TIF Committee.
Thank you.
Second.
Thanks, George.
Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, can we get the representative from the company just come up and talk about his business for a minute?
Yeah. Thank you,
If you don't
Mike.
mind.
Ryan Peters is here. Ryan?
Thank you, Ryan. I'm just, if you could just tell us about your company and what you do and what you're expecting to build.
Certainly, yes. We are currently.
Ryan, can you give us your name
Ryan Peters.
and address?
I'm the president of Lakeside Concrete Cutting.
Okay, thank you.
We currently have offices in Westbrook and in Newport. The office in Westbrook is leased, and we were looking for a permanent home for the business in close to Portland. The majority of our work is in Portland, and I am moving to Brunswick. So, for personal reasons, I would like the business to be closer to Brunswick than Westbrook is. I have two little girls, 2 and 5, and I want to be able to be home at the end of the day. So it's kind of for selfish reasons that we want to build on this side of Portland rather than on the industrial side of Portland. But we fully understand the architectural standards that will be required in this area, and we intend to comply with them. We are a construction company of about 45 people. I think we're at 47 right now. We have 21 in Westbrook, 26 in Newport, and about half of our staff in Newport drives to Portland daily. So eventually, as those people get burnt out, we plan on replacing them with people that are from southern Maine. But yeah, our business has grown from, we used to do $300,000 a year in sales in 2013, and now we do, last year we did over 4 million. This year projected to do 7 million. We do demolition in the commercial setting, so it's labor-intensive demolition that we do. We don't knock buildings down with excavators. We tear out the components of buildings by hand, basically. And so, like the renovation that happened here with Ledgewood Construction, we came in and pulled out the carpet and took out drywall. That's kind of the type of thing that we do. We have about 50% of our business is asbestos abatement now. We also do lead and mold removal. So we do the hazardous removals, heavy removals like concrete cutting. If you want to cut a doorway in your basement, we'll do that. If the Maine State Lab in Augusta, we're cutting out openings, masonry openings all through an old building on the old AM High campus in Augusta as they're building the Maine State Lab there. So we do big stuff like that. In Wyndham, they're going to be doing renovations to jail. So all the masonry inside that building will help cut down those walls and haul them out, as well as do the asbestos abatement there. So those type of projects is what we focus on. You're probably wondering what type of staff we would have at this building. We plan to have about 10 office positions in the building. We'll have a repair technician there, basically a shop guy that can do auto repairs, tool repairs, run errands, and then we would have one truck driver, as well as park 6 to 8 vehicles inside the building. So our crews would start there in the morning and head out to work for the day, and then come back at the end of the day and unload. So we'd have a lot of construction workers that aren't working in the building but would report there.
Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome to Cumberland.
Thank you.
Mike, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
Tom?
We have Ron,
I just have a question. As far as mold abatement's concerned, I'm gathering, because you mentioned the cutting of a door in a basement, that you'd consider abating the mold in one residential household. Is something as small as that? Or do you just take care of mold in commercial buildings and that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. We do residential work as well. We take off asbestos siding. We do mold in, a lot of times it's in attics or, in basements. We work a lot with CV and Mahar right here in Cumberland. Or it was called ESHA. We work hand in hand with those types of consultants.
Shirley?
My question's for the manager, and I'm sure it's obvious. This has been to the planning board and had it hasn't been to the
No,
planning board yet?
the recommendation to you from the TIF committee is that it's contingent upon planning board approval.
Okay.
So
And
they would
they'll
have to
have
go
a
to
public hearing with all the neighbors and,
No, this is
No.
just a site plan. This is a site plan for an approved
so
subdivision.
it's all acceptable?
Yes.
Okay.
Good question, Shirley. Okay, we have a motion and it was seconded, and approval? All in favor? Thank you. Unanimous, Brenda.
Thank you. Just one more thing. I just wanted to mention that this site does have a significant amount of ledge. It's probably somewhere $50,000 to $100,000 in ledge removal for us to build the building. So this is a huge incentive to make this project go forward with this site because of the high ledge costs. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item,
21-040, to hold a public hearing to consider an act on authorizing the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Cumberland Police Benevolent Association for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This evening, this represents, the next two items represent both of our unions, the police union and the public works union, that have worked this past year without a contract, primarily due to the pandemic. Their contracts expired last year on June 30th, 2020, and both agreed to go forward without any wage adjustments and without any changes to that existing contract. The finance director, myself, the assistant town manager, the captain of our police department, David Young, and Chief Charles Rumsey, who's here this evening, worked on that contract along with the union negotiating team and presented that contract to you several weeks ago for you to review in executive session. Your comments were taken and incorporated into the document and are here before you tonight, hopefully for your approval and authorization for me to go ahead and execute that three-year agreement with the police union. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, as would the chief, if you have any.
Any questions? Seeing none. Public hearing, anybody from the public? Ask for comments from the council. Yes.
The only thing that jumped out at me on this contract was the various different definitions of physically fit and fitness. Can you kind of, why we don't have a single standard, Chief?
Thank you, Counselor. Do you have a particular section of the contract in mind that you've been looking at? I know that there's a couple different things in there. The officers are required to do an annual fit for duty test. That is a test that was established by Central Maine Conditioning Clinic based on the types of things that they do when they're at work. There's also a provision in the contract that allows them to earn a stipend, an annual stipend, if they are able to pass the Maine Criminal Justice Academy's physical fitness standards at different levels. So that may be what you see there. One is a requirement for them to do their job, and another one is a fitness incentive that they're able to meet, and they get a small stipend if they're able to do that. That may be what you have seen in there.
That might have been. That was, I think that's probably what it was.
Okay, sir.
Any other thing, anything else, Bob? Okay. I asked for a public hearing, and did we see anybody from the public? So I'll ask for a motion.
I'll make a motion. I'm authorized the town manager to enter a labor contract agreement with the Cumberland Police Benevolent Association for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024.
Second. George? Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Next item,
21-041, to hold a public hearing to consider an act on authorizing the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Public Services Valhalla Employees Association for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024.
Mr. Town Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to get in really big trouble for this one. I overlooked Brenda, our HR director, in that last comment of those who worked on the contract. So tomorrow, I'm in huge trouble. So in this contract, however, the HR director, along with myself, the finance director, and the assistant town manager, worked on this document. And Brenda has always kept us on task and on track. And Brenda, I apologize. That was totally an oversight. Man, am I in trouble tomorrow. But this is for all our employees related to public works and public services, which constitute Parks, Valhalla, and our highway department. These guys have done another group that basically did not work with a contract last year and agreed to just work with the town through this past year. So it just speaks highly of all our employees and the willingness to work together through difficult times. So the contract is here before you tonight. Same thing was brought before the council in executive session to discuss the contractual language. And we believe we have a good contract that will be a good thing for the town for the next 3 years.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions of Bill? It's a public hearing. Anybody have any comments? Comments from the council? Seeing none, I'd like to have a motion, please.
Mr. Chairman, I move to authorize the town manager to enter into a labor contract agreement with the Public Services Valhalla Employees Association for the period of July 1st, 2021 through June 30th, 2024.
Do we have a second? Bob, second. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Next item?
21-042, to hold a public hearing to consider an act on amendments to the personnel ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, this ordinance went through the Ordinance Committee along with the town clerk, myself, and the HR director. We reviewed in painstaking detail the housekeeping exercise that is our personnel ordinance. What we did realize, though, is that it is an ordinance and it is not defined that way basically in the town codes. So we will be coming back before you someday in the near future to codify this and make it part of the town ordinance. So it was a good exercise. I think we all learned a lot, and we are recommending the approval. A lot of the changes that I'll report to you were related to the fire department, because basically we went to shift employees, and we were working what they call the 8-day schedule that many paramedics in our area work, so that they all could line up and you could work a 1-day and a 5-day and a 3-day and a 4-day. It makes more sense to those folks that are involved, and that's why we lined it up. Since then, we've also received notice that our fire department, 4 of our employees, which I think 3 may be eligible, have decided to move forward with a union, and we are awaiting additional information. We don't know how long that process would take, but what I would recommend that if it does go forward and we do come back with a third union to you, that then we amend the personnel ordinance, but leave that material in there for now so that we could follow the schedule, because we would rather have something to go by than something to kind of fake our way through. But Mike, maybe you could help us with this, because I don't really know. We haven't gone through this process. These unions were here when I got here, but what's typically the next step, and your thoughts around this?
So they've already submitted what they call interest ballots, and you've got to have 1/3 of the membership that has an interest in forming or joining a existing or not existing union. That's already in front of the Maine Labor Relations Board. They'll be sending out ballots with a return date This thing will be resolved one way or the other within 3 to 4 weeks max. Probably closer to 3, because send out ballots to each of the prospective members. Everybody gets a vote, and then they'll count them in front of the main Labor Relations Board on a particular date, and from that minute forward, they'll be joining their union.
Can
So-
you have a 3 or 4 member union? Is
Yeah.
that typical?
Yeah, I've got, I represent the Lisbon Sergeants, there's 2 of them. And their patrol unit's a separate contract, and they've got 14. I represent the Fort Kent Police Department, which is 3. Van Buren, which was 3. All the way down to Bangor, which is 70. So, yeah, it's doable. Yeah. So about 3 weeks, Mr. Manager, this will be resolved.
Thanks, Mike.
Yeah.
This is a public discussion. Anybody have anything from the any comments? Seeing none, I'd like to close the public discussion and ask for a motion by the council.
I'll give you a motion, Tom.
Thanks, George.
I move to amend the personnel ordinance as recommended by the ordinance committee.
You have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Shirley. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Next item.
21-043, to consider an act on authorizing the town manager to sell a small parcel of town-owned land on the corner of Greely Road and Halla Road.
Bill?
On the screen, I have a photo just about what we're talking about for the size of the parcel that would be sold. We brought this to the Finance Committee and explained that this property line is extremely wide. Most of our roads are only about 49.5 feet to 66 feet wide, and this is well in exceedance of that. It almost doubles that. And why it was is because at one time, in probably the 50s, there was a trestle over Greely Road, and that trestle obviously served a train track. So that track was been down since the 60s, but the area really was kind of no man's land and was essentially maintained by the staff at Valhalla and the homeowner at the time, and still present, Dottie Spalding. And she came before us and said, would the town consider basically squaring off her property line so it looks a little bit more realistic, and that she would have the ability to still maintain and landscape the area as she's done very nicely for many years. And we didn't really see any harm or foul in this. The Ordinance Committee recommended a couple of things, that there be a restriction so that plantings couldn't all of a sudden just show up in this area right in front of the sign, so the sign couldn't be seen. So there'll be a restriction that in the deed that limits the plantings that are allowed basically from where they are now, from the driveway over to the sign. And that $2,000 be assessed for legal fees so that we can prepare the documents for recording and transfer. And that was essentially the discussion that came out of the Ordinance Committee, the Finance Committee, and also with a recommendation to send to you tonight for further discussion in a public hearing. So as you know, any property transfer basically has to come through you. The LCC has seen this and agreed it made some sense to move forward, so that's why it's here before you tonight.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions of Bill? Seeing none. This is a public discussion. Anybody have anything from the public? Seeing none.
Hang on, Tom.
Oh, I got one. Okay, please. I'm sorry.
I'm Dottie Spalding, and I live at 320 Greely Road. I've lived there since 1964, and the land you probably thought belonged to me anyway. It looks like it's my property, and so I've always taken a great deal of pride in keeping it looking nice. Between the town and me, if I got there first mowing, I went below the sign. If they got there first, they came above the sign. All of the plantings there, with the exception of the rhododendron that is right beside the sign, I have put there with permission. and have maintained. If they needed to be cut down, I cut them down. If they need to be pruned, I do that. That would continue to happen. I plan no changes. The only thing I would like to do is maybe seed it a little bit, because it isn't very good grass seed down there. And the other thing is that next to the sign, the rhododendron tree is badly in need of some pruning, and I would like to do that. And other than that, I plan no changes or anything. I would like to maintain it the way that it always has been. And thank you for considering it.
Dottie, thank you. Mike?
What a great neighbor.
Yep.
Great neighbor, and I'm glad this is happening. So, and thank you for taking the time and the pride and keeping our property up. Greatly appreciated.
Any other comments from the council? Seeing none? I'll ask for a motion.
I move to authorize the town manager to sell a small parcel of town-owned land on the corner of Greely Road and Valhalla Road to Dorothy Spalding as recommended by the Finance Committee.
I'll second.
Shirley, second. Further discussion? All in favor? Thanks, Dottie. Appreciate it. New business.
Not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
21-044, to set a public hearing date of April 26 to consider an act on the adoption of the FY22 municipal budget.
Only to set a date tonight, so staff has no
So
comment.
moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Okay, now public discussion.
Not yet.
Oh, one more. Oh, my gosh. Okay. Sorry.
21-045, to authorize the lease purchase of the town sweeper
Oh, yeah, that's
per the
right.
recommendation of the town attorney.
That was an add-on, okay.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion by the council? All in favor? Don't put your hand down. Unanimous, Brenda. Okay, now we can go on to new business. Mike?
Just one thing. We've been talking about some of the civil discord going on, and I think it's come from both sides. I think somebody went down to Jeff Porter's house down in Scarborough the other day and put a sign up there. I think it was disgraceful. It has no place in this. I disagree with Jeff, but it's business and on some stuff. But he's a good, decent man, and he didn't deserve that, and I'm totally disgusted by it. I thought it was interesting tonight, one of our speakers asked about money being spent on FOIA, and she's been one of the 4 people that made FOIA requests. We had a candidate announce his candidacy for school board on social media and was lambasted by some of the group and some of the group involved with the school board. So if we're going to fix this problem, it's going to take all of us. And like I said, I wasn't even going to mention it tonight, but I just what happened with the Jeff Porter's house really got me going. And I know we're going to move past this eventually, but I just hope both sides can act like adults and come to the table. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mike. Shirley?
I share many of Mike's sentiments. I'm just going to add that there's never 2 sides. There are an infinite number of sides to look at any issue. And so that's where we need to find our commonality and pull it together. And I wasn't going to say anything, except that when I discuss current events with my 7th graders, and they'd want to say, well, that's it, or it's nothing, rarely is anything black and white. It's usually many shades of gray. So that's being said, since our last meeting, Recreation had their first advisory meeting in I can't tell you how long. I want to extend my thanks to young Pete Bingham for his extraordinary leadership in keeping recreation programs going and meeting some of the needs of our community. And I was totally unaware of this because Bill runs a tight ship and you know, people work hard for him, but Sarah Davis has filled in amazingly in that recreation office, and I had no idea, but with people out with COVID or quarantining or whatever, she really just because she's a great employee, picked up a lot of slack she didn't have to pick up. So I want to acknowledge our appreciation to not only her, but all the employees that have picked up a lot of slack during this pandemic. Social justice also met, and I'm going to let Allison talk about that if she's going to talk about that tonight. And I've gotten a couple, like I hardly ever post on social media, but somebody posted something about bulky waste and I suggested they take it to Riverside, and then I got, well, let's have more bulky waste. You know, it seems like bulky waste is taking less and less. I was like, no, actually our restrictions on bulky waste have not changed. The rules have just been enforced the last couple of years. So if you put something out there, bulky waste is coming up in less than a month. If you put something out there now that is not supposed to be there, where a couple of years ago they might have picked it up and taken care of it, that they'll now put a sticker on it and say, we don't pick this up. We haven't changed what we take or what we don't take. It's just we're enforcing those rules. So that might be why some people feel like we're taking less and less. And I think that's all I have for tonight.
Thanks, Shirley. Bob?
I'm going to follow along with Mike's comments. It's unfortunate that we don't have a crowded room here tonight. It's, and I hope that we have an audience that might be watching this. And without that, I think it's incumbent upon us to issue a statement. And I think that Allison has showed some initiative with that. I'm very disappointed with the tone of the people of this community, with their actions and reactions and further reactions. And I can't tell you how disappointed I am to find that there was a sign put on the superintendent's front lawn. That's just totally unacceptable. It crosses the threshold of what's proper behavior. I'm just so disappointed. I've lived here a long time. I can't recall ever having seen anything like this being done. It's, you know, I've thought back, you know, some of the things that I did as a kid, and I wouldn't want to expose anybody to some of the shenanigans that I was involved with, but we all know right from wrong, and this is wrong, and I think it's clear that we as a board speak in unison and say something. So, and then I have, I guess, one little housekeeping request. And Brenda, is there a way for us to, when you send us our folder for the program, for lack of another word, to be able to break it out easier?
I can show you how.
I'm scrolling, trying to catch up sometimes, and
I'll show you after the meeting. It's very
Okay.
easy.
it's my ignorance again.
Lessons forthcoming.
All right, that's all I got.
Thanks. Just a few comments. I do appreciate the Conservation Commission coming tonight earlier, and they did a terrific job. Our food pantry is probably around 60 to 65 families a week, so that is really helpful. And I do thank all those that volunteer, especially doing all the work that they do, so thank you so much for that. We had budget meetings on Saturday morning, and I do appreciate all the work that was done, especially some of our citizens, Mark Sechrist and Bill Stiles. And also I'd like to thank, are you still on the Zoom?
He's gone.
He's gone? Okay.
He's at home watching, though.
Oh, okay. I was gonna thank the staff, and I do want to thank Bill Stiles for all the work that he put into it. Thank you for your input. Appreciate it. And I think that's all I have. Allison?
All right. So one, I wanted to reinforce on April 1st, after the, so MSAD 51, the town of Cumberland and the towns of North Yarmouth came together in reaction to what we'd actually determined to be a cluster of suicides in our community over the last few years. And so on April 1st, we launched a mental health resources website, which is kind of hosted on the Cumberland website, but MSAD 51 links to it. Thanks, Bill, you're pulling it up. And then North Yarmouth's website links to it as well. And this is really the first step in an initiative to really what will be our Smash the Stigma initiative around mental health and being supportive as a community. And there was kind of a letter that went out on behalf of all three of our communities. So MSAD 51, Cumberland, yes, thank you, Bill. Really talking about how a healthy community is one that supports these conversations and that it isn't behind closed doors. We have seen, especially in COVID, as folks are so isolated, that our neighbors are struggling in isolation, and those kind of more subtle hints that could come in a face-to-face conversation aren't happening. And so how do we and do we and we should create an environment that, number one, puts the resources that we do have available when someone's in crisis, but also when they just have questions and they want to talk and they don't know who or how to get to someone to talk to. And so that was the impetus of this website. And there is more to come. This team of private citizens, as well as kind of members of the council's select boardmen, as well as MSAD 51 kind of coming together. So we will be reaching out to the community for volunteers and future engagement as we build momentum around this over time. Anything I missed, Bill? Okay. Two, Shirley alluded to, the Social Justice Committee did meet last week. In a workshop, we were discussing with Maine intercultural communication consultants around their initial proposal to us around some training. So our plan is to come to the council, I think we landed on the May 10th council meeting, where we'll go through that in full detail and bring that up for consideration. So more to come on that, but just wanted to highlight that happened. And then also the Communications Committee had a very busy Wednesday last week. So Ron, myself, and Eliza met last week. So just some updates for folks. And Ron, keep me honest, my computer has died from battery, so if I missed anything. So as folks know, we did the pulse survey, and so some interesting things that came out of that is we had about a 10% response rate, which probably sounds low, but is actually quite high when you think about survey response rates and engagement. We got some new Cumberland Crier subscribers out of that. I think it was like another 50 or so in total.
yeah.
So we're at about 3,400 Cumberland Crier subscribers, which considering we have around 3,100 households, assuming there's some duplication, that's a pretty great subscriber rate in our town. What came back in that survey was across all demographics, all lengths of time, living in town, age, gender. The Cumberland Crier was the key form of communication, of learning what's happening in the town and then being able to get information and find information. So clearly with Eliza's in time investment and creativity and in energy, the Cumberland Crier has really grown into quite the communication resource. But it really just shows us that as we're thinking about prioritization and where we kind of continue to prioritize time, that is a key place. And then we really just talked about kind of topics for future pulse surveys, so we're working through that. Did I miss anything?
Thanks, Alice. George?
Yeah, I want to pick up on what Mike started to mention. Jeff Porter's, the sign that was placed on his property in Scarborough is just, I don't know, for a better word, hideous. I've been giving a lot of thought to the present situation, and our manager mentioned that he expects to see matters get worse, which is just saddens me greatly. There was a national publication recently, which some people may not know about, that suggested that Falmouth and Cumberland in Maine were the two most desirable communities in the United States to live in. And I think we've talked about conversation, we've talked about finding ways to communicate better as a group. And in my mind, there aren't too many sides to this. I think there are 2 or 3 sides to it. And the problem is very simple. Their attitude is in your face. And they're back and forth at each other in your face. And the bottom line is we need civility in this community. We need people to respect each other. We need to do all of the things that I remember having seen this community do for the last 40 some odd years I've lived here. And it's deeply saddening to see things deteriorate to the point where they have to some extent. Allison wrote an email that suggested a statement that might go to the crier, and she's always articulate and she writes well. All my concern with the statement is that the one word I came away with was preachy. Well, nobody can get much more preachy than I just got. But we ought to, as adults, act like we have some wisdom. And some of us really care about this community dearly. And a lot of us have loved this community for many years, back when it was mostly farms. And we remember the transition of process as things have gone forward. We've had good town councils over a period of years who have made this community largely what it is in terms of policy. And to have it trashed by disagreement among people that really, when it comes right down to it, isn't that important. The only thing that makes it important is the lack of goodwill that it's created among too many people in town. And I go back, and I can't help it, but I'm sick of people being offended about various issues. If somebody all of a sudden decides they're offended over something, they ought to stand up and do something about it. One of our early council meetings 4 or 5 councils ago, I made the statement that I was brought up to look level, not up to anybody or down on anybody. Immediately, there was a rise in the back of the room. That isn't good enough. Well, I'm sorry, that is good enough. If all of us were to look at life that way and really lived our lives that way, I think we'd probably be a better world. I don't know what else you need to do, but if you do need to do something else, it's basically coming from somewhere else rather than from yourself. So we all need to sit back and have guts enough to make our feelings known and stop pussyfooting around this whole situation, which is just getting out of hand, and it needs to stop right now. That's all I have to say.
Ron, before we get started, I have $20 here for the food pantry 4-H club, and then Mr. Stiles had to come in and he said that he has $100. So you want to talk about that $100? Okay, all right. So there's.
I'll start off on a good note. I'm gonna donate $20, and our good friend Dean donated another $20, who he's been very generous. And I will work downwards from there. If it hadn't been for COVID and the school board incidents last year, it would have been a pretty boring sit here on the town council. We wouldn't have had half of the controversy that we've had, because people can't get along, and people won't show anybody any respect. I think the sign on Jeff Porter's house in Scarborough was done in very poor taste. Obviously, whoever did it didn't want to be seen when they did it, doesn't want to be known that they did it. Own up to it. Come here and tell us that you did it. Tell us why. Don't do it behind everybody's back. Be a man about it. It's all ridiculous. It's not the town that I grew up in. This has gotten so far out of hand, it's not even funny. Jeff Porter's a good man. He's doing a job. He has a job to do. He has to look out for the staff. He has to look out for the students. He has to look out for the citizens of this town. And in my mind, he's done a good job. Sean McBrady is a good man. I get along fine with Sean. This never should have gone as far as it's gone. It is just out of control, and it's just gonna get worse. I don't know what happened to the town I grew up in, but it's not here anymore. I struggled to take out my papers to run for 3 more years on this council, because I feel like all I am is a peacekeeper. I don't feel like I've accomplished anything. I'm a peacekeeper. And that's not right. I take pride in the town that I live in. I grew up here. I want my grandkids to grow up here, but I don't want them to live through what this is. I don't think this is right. I'll get off that subject. Tomorrow night in this council chambers at 6 o'clock, there's gonna be a very special meeting. There's a sex offender moving into Russell Road in Cumberland. There'll be a special meeting held here at 6 o'clock, informational meeting if anybody wants to attend it. I just think that it's very important that people know this. That's all I have, Tom. Thanks.
Thanks, Ron.
Can I just, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on Ron. I'm glad you took your papers out, okay? I am
I
very
had to put a
glad.
lot of thought into it.
I know you did, so thank you. Allison?
I think it's interesting, or I saw tonight around the harness racing disagreement. And then I also saw at the end of the conversation, a group of people shake hands, introduce themselves to each other, and walk out of here and have a further conversation in the hallway. So while I know there is some pocket of very intense tension and behavior that all of us on this council can agree we disagree with, I think tonight was a great example that the core of the town that all of us love and take great pride in, and why I took my papers out a year ago, and why I'm sure, Ron, you decided to at the end of the day, is that we know the core is still there. And it's about being able to move forward together and having respect for each other, and recognizing that just because you have the right to say something doesn't mean it's the right thing to say. And how you say something, if you don't realize how you say something makes a difference and an impact on someone, then you're not really communicating, you're just talking.
Thank you. Mr. Town Manager, you got anything else?
Just one real quick thing. Last council meeting, I spoke passionately about a sweeper. And of all things, I have to come back and eat a little bit of crow tonight. The reason why we demonstrate all our equipment is because we want to see what it can go through and what it can actually do in the streets of Cumberland. Well, the wonderful vacuum sweeper I spoke so eloquently and highly of failed miserably. Basically, it bogged down in heavy wet sand, and not even really wet sand, just sprinkled wet sand. So we asked to demo the mechanical sweeper, is the same type of sweeper we have to date, and that essentially blew the doors off the other sweeper. So we're obviously not going to go forward with the vacuum sweeper. We're going to be back to the same type of sweeper. There's no difference in price, but just eating a little bit of humble pie tonight because the technology, the way I describe the cyclone effect of the vacuum sweeper wasn't so cyclone-y. It didn't do so great. But to our credit and to the credit of Steve Guggens and Danny Burr and the guys up at Public Works, this is why we try these things out. And if they don't work in the application that we have here, I don't care how it works in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, or Portland, or any other town around us. If it doesn't work here, it doesn't fit here. So that was very clear in a very short period of time. When the second sweeper showed up today, they went everywhere, and it was nothing it couldn't do that obviously the other sweeper was challenged at doing. Our issue, honestly, is wet sand. When we pick up wet sand, it's a big struggle with the brooms, and it couldn't be picked up at the moisture content, which sometimes is, we sweep in the rain for a reason. We like to keep the dust down, and we could probably not have swept in the rain the way we've been doing. So some humble pie tonight. Really, I hate those vacuum sweepers now, and we're back on the mechanical tribe, and it was very frustrating and very discouraging, because all I just would do was shake my head, and a couple of you actually were driving by when we were having our meltdowns, and thank God didn't pull in to see what was going on, because it wasn't good. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Do you have a motion for adjournment?
No, Tom?
Oh, please. Yeah.
Ron Greco. I apologize. I will not be able to keep my composure at this time. Ms. Foster, you've hit on a subject very dear to me, as I lost my brother from suicide when he was 14 years old. And that's part of the reason why you saw my name earlier tonight, as I requested recall petitions for 4 members of the school board. It's obviously deeper than that. But I sat with Mr. Porter many years ago as we had a suicide in town. In my brother's circumstances, he died from suicide days after another suicide attempt at our school. It is widely known for many, many decades, suicide attempts increase directly after another suicide attempt in a community. I spoke with Mr. Porter about this. I had commitment from Mr. Porter. He would take action, communicate to parents the risk, increased risk. Nothing happened. However, that has absolutely nothing to do with getting my children back to school. My eldest daughter will be the same age, the same grade as my brother next year. This pandemic has created a mental health crisis amongst our children. In our group, we have one goal, and one goal only,
is to end that crisis and get our kids the education they deserve and need. I assure you, our group has no part in any of the divisiveness in this town. We are absolutely disgusted by some of the actions taken by members of our community, members of neighboring communities that have nothing to do with what is going on in our town, who will probably place the most disgusting of signs of all, coming up as Mr. Shane has shared with us. Our goal with the recall petitions is to correct the oversight that we've seen from the school board to the administration and to work diligently to get our kids back in school. We also want to mend this community back together, as we are not from the right or from the left or political in any way. I've lived in this community for 12 years, or near 12 years now. I volunteered at the schools. I volunteer coach. I have hours and hours of community service here. To the point where my picture was taken with my daughter and put on the wall of the Performing Arts Center. I think people know my intentions are genuinely good and helpful. I appreciate any support that you're able to give us as far as we work hard to bring this community back together and give the voters the opportunity to vote to keep or reject any of the school board members that are currently there. We are not asking for any particular board member to stay or go. That is for the voters to decide, and we want to give them that choice. I thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Sorry for your loss. Have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Mike, thank you. We have a second from Bob. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous, Brenda. Thank you.
Nice